Hi everyone, this is Suman from Decode Now. Welcome to the lecture series on building a Spring Boot application to perform basic CRUD operations. So in the previous video, we saw how we could connect to a in-memory database and how to do all these setups and the configurations in the application.properties file. So let's take a look at the to-do list. So this in-memory database setup that was the H2 database setup is completed. So I'll mark it as completed. Next, we have to create a model class. So in this video, we'll be creating this particular model class. So this is our Spring Boot application. So here I'll create a new package called model. And under this new this package, that is the model package, I'll create a Java class and create a class called let's say personal details. So we'll be storing personal details. So this I'll since this model class I'll be marking this particular class with the annotation entity. So this annotation makes this particular class an entity class. So let's learn more about this particular annotation. So at entity is an important annotation in the Java persistence API. It is used to mark a class as an entity. So it indicates that this particular class is an entity. So whenever a particular class is annotated with this particular at entity annotation, then this class becomes an entity class. And what this means is it should be mapped to a database table. So as soon as an entity annotation is used to that particular class, that class will be mapped to a database table. So along with this entity annotation, I will be using one more annotation called table. And I'll give this particular table a name. I'll call it as personal details. So as it is self-explanatory, at table annotation says that this is a table and it provides a name and the name is enclosed within double quotes, which is personal details in this case. So if you have some prior knowledge on relational database, every table has a primary key. So this primary key will not be null and will always be unique. So let's create a primary key for this particular table. I'll say something like private and the data type integer, and I'll give it the name ID. So if I want this to be my primary key, I should use one more annotation called at ID. What this at ID does is, it is an annotation. It is applied to a field in an entity class. So the integer ID is a field of the entity class personal details. So to this field, this ID annotation is applied. And it indicates that as I said, it represents the primary key of the entity. So as we have mentioned at ID to this particular field integer ID, so this becomes the primary key of entity class personal details. And in order to auto generate this particular value, there is one more annotation called at generated value, and it takes a strategy and it would be equal to generation type dot identity. So I'll explain this part of the annotation. So at generated value is an annotation that specifies how the primary key value should be generated. So as the name suggests, it generates a value for our primary key, that is the ID, and how it should be generated is mentioned in the strategy. So strategy attribute of this generated value determines the generation strategy of the ID or the primary key that we have mentioned. So there are various strategies available. The one which we are using here is the identity. It is like an auto increment value for our ID. And there are other strategies like auto, sequence, UUID, which is universal unique ID, and table. So for our Spring Boot application, we'll be using the identity. And let's have for personal details, we can store something like first name, the first name of the user. So first name of the user will be of type string, and I'll give the name as fname. And one more would be the last name, and I will name it as last name. We can also store the address of the user, so that I will be saying it as private string address. Hi guys, I forgot to mention about these two annotations, the getter and the setter. So these two annotations are provided by the Lombok dependency, which we added in while creating our starter package. So it avoids all the boilerplate code. So suppose let's say we were not using this at getter and setter annotation, then we had to do something like get ID and return ID, and for set we had to do this dot ID equals ID. Similarly for the first name, the last name, and the address, and also any other fields for that matter, we had to individually write the get method for that and also the set method for that. So all this boilerplate code can be avoided by using these two annotations, that is at getter and at setter, which is provided by the Lombok dependency. Let's continue back to the video. So it's always a good practice to use comments. So for example, I would say something like it is the ID of the table. Similarly, the first name of the user. Similarly, I'll just copy this and paste it here to say last name of the user and the address of the user. So this is our entity class or the model which we have created. Um, so this entity annotation says that this personal details is an entity class, and it should be mapped to a relational database. And at table gives the name for this particular table. And this at ID and generated value automatically generates the value for our ID and marks it as a primary key. And we have three other fields, that is the first names, last name, and the address for our personal details model. So this is all for the video. If you have learned something new, please do subscribe to our channel and support us. If you have any questions, requests, or suggestions, let us know in the comment section below. And don't forget to like the video. See you in the next video.